This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Friday, January 12th. CubsCon slated to get underway this evening. We'll see, there's a lot of snow and stuff, so hopefully everybody's travel is not affected. They can get in and enjoy the festivities responsibly. We'll have our crew, our guys, CHGO Cubs guys at CubsCon this weekend. And Brendan, last week, you and I, not physically or in any serious way, I want to make that clear for, any of the sort of AI technology on YouTube scanning this video. We did loosely threaten the Cubs president, Jed Hoyer, with content. We said if he did not make actual real transactions, not just minor league catchers for depth, we were going to spend the hour no longer talking about the offseason plan or free agents or Cody Bellinger. We were going to talk about the likes of our childhood growing up, just reminiscing, guys being dudes, naming names. Paul
Ryan
Bacco,
Terrio, Mike Fontenot.
You like to talk
Augie Ojeda, Todd
Jock
Hundley.
Jones.
Jeremy
Burnitz, Todd Walker. I can keep going.
Jock Jones was great in MLB The Show.
Damian Miller.
So I never told you the story. Real quick, I convinced my third grade class Damian Miller was my father. I swear to God.
I didn't know where you were going with that.
I swear to God.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because, he was with the Diamondbacks, So everyone knew who Damian Miller was.
And you were such a talented baseball player as a young man.
They're like,
that
oh,
it was
of course.
Very believable.
Yeah, of course. So the entire year, Damian Miller was my father.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway.
I did not know that, and I love that.
Anyway.
But Jed heard our plan, and he said, I don't want to hear an episode about Paul Bacco, you guys. I don't want to hear any talk of Jose Macias and Nafi Perez and David Kelton.
That name is on the banned list. You know better than that.
It should be.
Anyway, Ryan Terrio had a 341 weighted on base average.
Jed heard that and said, I'm not interested. I'm going to make real moves, and we have real moves. So the Cubs, as you and I talked about, he was part of our discussion on some of the remaining starting pitching options last week. The Cubs do indeed sign Shota Imanaga out of Japan. He is a Chicago Cub. It is official. It was announced as official on Thursday. We have a jersey number, et cetera, et cetera. He's here. Apparently, he's been living here for a few months.
Yeah.
I apologize. I should have been scouring the streets of Chicago
neighbor.
To get the scoop. I dropped the ball. I don't know. I'll talk to Cody about how we didn't figure that one out.
All of you guys did.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the Cubs also complete a trade with the Los Angeles Dodgers, sending one of their top pitching prospects, Jackson Ferris, to the Dodgers in exchange for Michael Busch, one of the Dodgers' top hitting prospects and a top 50 overall prospect in the MLB, according to MLB Pipeline. More to the deal than just that, but those are the particular headliners and the names you may recognize right off of the bat. We will talk about that in more detail as well. We will also talk maybe a little bit, probably not too much, but on Thursday night, we do get the news that now former Cub Marcus Stroman inking a deal for 2 years with the New York Yankees for slightly less money than he would have gotten if he had picked up that option for the 1 year with the Chicago Cubs. So it will be up to the beholder to decide if he made the right decision, but he is reportedly off the market as Brendan and I sit down to record this episode. So we will talk about all of that and more. I would also direct you, the crew, Luke, Cody, and Ryan, did have Greg Huss, friend of the podcast from Northside Bound, on their show this afternoon. And he went into a lot of detail on the trade, what to think about Michael Busch, what to think about Jackson Ferris, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are interested in that, that is definitely a conversation worth listening to. But Brendan, before we go any further, I will take this opportunity to hand the microphone over to you. I'm assuming you were waiting for me to prompt you. I will take your congratulations, as the Michigan Wolverines are the national champions. So I cede the floor to you.
Listen, congratulations. You deserve happiness. I want my friends to be happy. This is a terrific week. We have Chicago Cubs major league moves. We have you celebrating national championships. Congratulations. I have nothing but good to say to you, Corey. So congrats.
Thank you.
No hate. No hate.
I will leave it at that. I'm sure a large portion of our listeners do not like the University of Michigan. And
they hate you for bringing it up.
Despite it promising to be obnoxious to Cody many times, I will not. We have Chicago Cubs baseball to talk about, and I will leave it at that. But I will say, go blue. And hail to the victors.
Wrap it up here. Wrap it up. There we
Nobody's
go.
got it better than us, Brendan.
Oh boy, here we go.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you for the brief moment to discuss that.
Can we get back into Cubs talk? Thank you. Okay.
So I've kind of laid out, obviously, our big topics here, and we will also talk about kind of putting these moves into perspective, because this is an interesting time, I think, for the Cubs in this offseason, because you look at these moves and you can kind of read them different ways. What does it mean for the rest of this offseason? What does it mean for how the Cubs are going to fill out their roster? Who's playing what positions? What positions might they still be targeting after some of these moves? There's a lot of questions that we don't have the answer to. And of course, this episode is not live. So if something has happened in between us recording and this episode going live on YouTube,
which is possible,
please bear with us.
Jed's operating.
Jed is wheeling and dealing now.
The stove is up high for Jed.
Who knows? Yeah. So we'll see. Hopefully, as our wonderful producer Lawrence suggested, the next move that is made is keeping Cody Bellinger under wraps until he jumps out of the stage at CubsCon or something like that.
Okay. I can get behind that.
Listen, I would admire the pageantry. I'll tell you that.
So how do you feel? There's a lot of moves going on. We talked about it before we got into the show. A lot of different directions, as you hinted at. Generally, you feel optimistic? Do you feel neutral? Do you feel pessimistic?
I think I feel like this is a good start. I do feel what I anticipated I would feel, which was I really need them to just do something. As odd as it is, knowing that eventually they were going to spend money and make moves and try to at least improve the team, to what degree we didn't know and we still don't know. But you knew it was going to happen. But even still, we needed it to happen. Please just do something so that we can have a transaction on the ledger in the last 300 something days, please. Yeah. So I'm glad to see it. I'm very happy that, we finally have made those moves. I like the Imanaga signing a lot, as we talked about last week. I
love that signing.
Yeah, and I know you hopped on the emergency show with Cody, Luke, and Ryan, but I anticipate you'll have a more in-depth breakdown.
I have 6 graphs loaded for this show. Yeah, 6. I should have made. I know you count on your fingers. 6.
I should have had some alcohol for this episode.
I got some right here, buddy.
And I only have water, but yes. So Brendan will have a more detailed breakdown there. The trade, I don't really have a strong reaction to. I think I'm intrigued.
I feel like it prompted a lot of strong reactions, including from myself. I will say it was a strong initial reaction.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and it's going to sound like a cop-out, but I got to see what the rest of the plan is. I think that's the pretty simple read I have on it. I liked Jackson Ferris a lot as a prospect. I was intrigued when they drafted him and reading about the work that they've done with him throughout his time in the Cubs system. But I just don't have it in me to get worked up about a 19-year-old pitcher. And that's not to say that he's not going to be good or he can't be, but there is a lot of risk in any young pitcher, and the steps to go from where he is to major league talent and things like that. There's just a lot that goes into that. So it's not to say that it can't go badly for the Cubs or that I love Michael Busch or anything. And again, we'll talk about this more in detail later in the episode, but my initial reaction was I'm intrigued. Jed is making moves, and hopefully this is the beginning of more to come. How are you feeling about the Cubs finally making some moves?
On the surface, comparing what they gave up for what they got in return makes a lot of sense. They're giving up 2 teenage prospects, extremely high ceiling. Jackson Ferris, for me, was one of my favorite young pitchers in the system. As I hear, Hope was one of the more intriguing positional prospects, given his performance last season, his youth, his athleticism, his flexibility around the diamond. So those are the two of the highest ceiling prospects the guys have in the system. Now, seeing what they got in return with Almonte and Busch, those are two guys immediately having value for the major league team. So I like that in a vacuum. Where, like you, I need to see play out is how many at-bats is Jed in the front office going to slot in for Busch going into the season? If it's 500 plus, and if it diminishes their pursuit of other players,
right,
then I might start to question, well, is the cost of acquiring Busch hidden in that they won't go out and get other bats that are more projectable? So that's what we have to wait and see. I talk about hoping the Cubs having a harder push where you're pushing that win projection to a clear-cut 90 plus total. On paper, you can't confidently say that with Busch. He's a really high ceiling guy. He's had phenomenal numbers in AAA. We'll go over them later in the episode. And he's very different from Matt Mervis, even though the sum of their total numbers in AAA have been comparable in the past, but they're very different hitters. Busch projects to be a much better hitter given some of the underlying traits compared to Mervis. So the hype for Busch is real. I get all of that. The age and some of the underlying limitations are also justifiable to talk about. But ultimately where I fall is on paper, makes a lot of sense. I like it. It gives him a better opportunity to win next year and in 2025. On the other hand, I think there's hidden cost with that, and it could affect their pursuit of other players, as well as one hidden cost is what are the other deals that could have been included with Jackson Ferris in a bigger prospect package to yield a better return. Yeah. And so that's where I'm waiting to see what happens. But it does. I think
that was a lot of people's initial reaction, is that if you saw Jackson Ferris's name come across in a trade, you were not expecting it to be for another minor leaguer, and Busch has had a cup of coffee at the major leagues, I think like 26 games or something, but a minor leaguer, a prospect, right? So and I feel that, but again, that's where, and I don't want it to be a cop out, but I got to kind of see what the rest of the plan is. I agree with you. If the plan is like, hey, we got Imanaga for the rotation and we're going to let some young guys get some reps at the corners, and it's Morel at third and Busch at first, and hope the offense can figure it out. We're going to get PCA in there. We're going to rely on the youth. Then I'm going to be pissed off. Of course I am, because that team isn't going to be very good unless you hit a 99th percentile outcome, as you always like to say, on half the team, which is not a good way to gamble on things. No. But if he is a way to add that kind of bottom tier depth, but with potential to the major league roster, as opposed to spending money on those positions in the likes, as we saw last year, of Mancini, Barnhart, Hosmer, then I'm very much into it, because that was one of the big things we talked about is you should, if you have this time to be giving to uncertain things, whether it's someone on the older side or the younger side, it should be something that has the potential to be productive for you down the road. And if you found out that Michael Busch could be a real hitter at this level, even if it's just as a DH, okay, well, that's very valuable because he's 26 years old and you would have a lot of years of control on that. Whereas last year, if Eric Hosmer hit, great, he's however old and not a part of your future. So what are you really learning there? And it didn't work that way. And so it was just a big waste of everyone's time. So if it is a way to add some ceiling to that bottom portion of the roster, some youth, and take a flyer on a guy who did not really have a good path in Los Angeles, given that, some of the positions he plays are occupied by very good players in Los Angeles, then I'm all for it. But as you said, if it's kind of okay, well, we're going to let this guy try to reach his potential, so we're not going to go and spend money on some of these other guys, then I'm not going to be happy about that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I will say my initial reaction was maybe a little dramatic. I saw Jax Ferris, I saw Hope, and I saw the return. I'm like, man, I've always been talking about for over a year now is I want to see one of those massive deals. As you and I always say, where is our Arenado? Where is our Goldschmidt? Where is our Mookie Betts? And it probably wasn't the right thing to do, but I conceptualized scenarios where Jackson Ferris seemed like the perfect guy to include in one of those bigger packages. So when I saw that, it did leave me initially as a little unsettled, because even despite the high ceiling with Busch and the top 50 prospect status and all of that coming over to the Cubs, it still is not a highly projectable 2024 3, 4, 5+ win guy that I've been hoping the Cubs would acquire. And maybe they will acquire in secondary moves.
It does not give you a certain player improving the 2024 Cubs, which is something that, obviously they need.
And they can still do that.
Yeah, they can still do that. Yes. So that's why you kind of say, like, all right, well, hold on. Like,
let's see.
We've been waiting for Jed to cook, and he's hopefully at the beginning stages of he's only added oil to the pan, Brendan. He has not even begun.
Sizzling. The garlic is kind of toasting right now,
Listen, if in his mind he's pulling the finished product out of the oven, big problem.
We got an issue.
But I think he is only at the beginning of this recipe. So let's see. How long do you think we could keep that analogy, that metaphor going? A metaphor or analogy?
It's a metaphor. Analogy involves using.
We could just do the food thing the whole time.
We probably could. Yeah, that could be a challenge for us.
Sure. So
anyway,
it's a very intriguing trade, and I can sort of see why people might have some strong opinions on it. I will say, like, part of this, and I think it was Brian Smith, who of course is at Cub Prospects on Twitter. He formerly with Bleacher Nation, of course, and
good friend of the show.
Yes, a big friend of the show. I think he was, talking about how this kind of moves up the timeline a little bit in things. Like, instead of hoarding 19-year-old prospects, you're getting guys who may and hopefully can make an impact for you now, like right now. And even
makes sense.
There's definitely some concerns with Busch, especially on the defensive side, where that home might be as far as a position goes. But, you read a lot of these scouts, writers, evaluators, they all really believe in his ability to hit, despite, a short stint at the MLB level. The stint was 27 games, 81 plate appearances. And, it was not good,
was not good at all.
You can read into those 81 plate appearances however you'd like.
I have a graph that represents that later in the show that we can show.
Yeah. So, I think, we're talking about this more. So this is our first topic. Imanaga will be our second topic. Like, we're already deep in the weeds on this trade. So that's where we are. Do you want to hit our first ad break here, and then we can come back and go kind of deeper into this trade?
Let's do it.
Cool.
All right. So first ad break here is from CIRCA. Tight money lines will strive to be just a -110 split on the CIRCA Sports menu, unlike other sports books, which may use -115 or -120 splits. CIRCA Sports keeps as little money as possible on large market bets, especially compared to those other books. They don't limit players based on their winnings. Every player has the same limits, unlike other books who do limit winning players. So if you're on a hot streak, CIRCA will not limit you. And there's real people behind the CIRCA Sports brand to resolve issues in a timely fashion, unlike other sports books who use chatbots. All aspects of their app are being run by the same team that runs the main CIRCA Sportsbook at CIRCA Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. So download the CIRCA Sports Illinois app at circasports.com/Illinois-app to sign up today. Also, be on the lookout for CIRCA events, watch parties, tailgates. If you or somebody you know may have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-426-2537, text GAMB to 833-234, or visit areyoureallywinning.com. A second break here from Game Time. If you're like me, you stress out trying to find the best prices for tickets. You should not have to worry, like me, to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I've used Game Time to go to baseball games, hockey games, football games. I know our friends on the show, Cody and Luke and Ryan, looking at using it to buy concert tickets. Whatever floats your boat, Game Time can be used to buy those tickets at the lowest price. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, and download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, Brendan. So getting back into the trade, I should mention the full trade since we're doing this as our first topic. The Cubs receiving infielder Michael Busch and reliever Yency Almonte from the Dodgers, and they are sending, of course, Jackson Ferris and Zahir Hope. So that is the full trade, 2 for 2. And again, the headliner being the big pitcher going from the Cubs to the Dodgers, the big hitter going from the Dodgers to the Cubs. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a surprising trade. The last time, I don't know if this is right or not, but I feel like the last time we've had one of these like fringe prospect, fringe major league trades is probably like the Rizzo Cashner deal, where the Cubs gave up a major leaguer in Cashner for a fringe guy in Rizzo, a decade ago.
It did kind of remind, I saw some people talking about that. Yeah.
Did that work out for the Cubs?
Some people of that. It did. Yes. Okay. Anthony Rizzo was very good for the Chicago Cubs and led them to a World Series championship in 2016.
Which year?
2016.
Okay.
He actually caught the last out.
Of what?
The Game 7 of the 2016 World Series.
Just making sure.
No, sorry, I should have clarified. You're right.
You should have. People forget that. I forget that too sometimes.
It could have been any game that he
could have been any game.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, like if you look through the numbers from Michael Busch in his minor league career, the dude hits, and he's hitting from the left side. He absolutely mashes right-handed pitching. Yeah. So again, you can read into that small stint in the majors however you want, but certainly the precedent is there that this guy can hit, and he's done it at pretty much every level he's been at. The numbers look really good, and you just need the time in the majors. That seems to be the sentiment from a lot of folks. So really what I think the big point of discussion in this trade, because here's the thing, and I think this was something that Greg Huss was talking about on the show with our guys on Thursday. Like I said, you should check out that interview with Greg, Luke, Cody, and Ryan. But Greg basically made the point that the nice thing about this trade is that if we'll be angry about Michael Busch if it doesn't work before Jackson Ferris is likely able to rub it in our face if he does pan out and end up being good. Like the Cubs are getting the first look at whether this trade works or not.
Yeah.
And so, for me, is it maybe something we relitigate years from now when the Dodgers and their pitch lab have unlocked Jackson Ferris? Maybe, but that's several years from where we are sitting today. So that is just not an immediate thing. It's not going to be an immediate thing. I think the big question, as we sort of laid out, is what does this mean for the rest of the Cubs offseason? And where do they see Michael Busch slotting in? Now, reading over at The Athletic from Sahad F. Sharma, he was talking about how it seemed like the current plan might be to have him at first base. The Cubs don't have a clear option there. Michael Busch does not look good at third base. The reports are not good about his defense at third base. So that doesn't seem, given that the Cubs already have people that they might want to put at third base, but can't play defense at third base, maybe not something that they needed more of. So perhaps first base DH is the plan at this moment. But of course, it led to a lot of people asking the questions. Okay, well, what does that mean for Cody Bellinger? What does it mean for maybe Rhys Hoskins? What does it mean for their, rumored interest in someone like Matt Chapman? And I don't have the answer, but I think that is going to be, along with, of course, Michael Busch's performance, a pretty big indicator of how this trade is received by Cubs fans and ultimately how we end up grading it.
I think the way Jets operated, is by offsetting risk in high volume of players. Look at the first base situation last year. It did not work out. In hindsight, it was a bad process. He offset risk with Mervis by signing Hosmer, signing Mancini, Mervis, all three of them fizzled out. Didn't work. I imagine that this will not be the last move for Busch. There will be contextual moves as a result of making this trade. That's my expectation. I hope that's my end result of what Jet ends up doing. The way I see Busch is I like the ceiling. I like what he's done in AAA, where the limitations for me exist are, one, his age. Now, the counter to that argument is, well, he was been blocked for 3 years with Freddie Freeman and Max Muncy and the likes of a deep Dodgers roster. That is all true, but still, it's a fact he's 26 years old without major league experience. So that is still a factor, despite the reasoning underlying that age problem. Now, if you look at Busch, bad year in his cup of coffee in 2023, if you compare that to what Matt Mervis did, they're very different struggles. And they're actually very different performances in AAA, despite the bulk sum of their value being similar in AAA. If you look at Matt Busch versus Michael Busch, I always say Matt Busch.
Who's Matt Busch?
I don't.
Is that someone?
It's a player from years ago. It's just the Matt Mervis. All these M's, all these M names kill me.
Oh yeah, the pitcher Matt Busch. Yeah, sure.
We got Michael Busch. I gotta nail that into my head. So if you look at Michael Busch versus Matt Mervis, if you look at their whiff rates, you can already see some obvious differences jump off at you. On the left here of this heat map, if you're on the Spotify channel, you can see this on YouTube. You see that Matt Busch has more blue all throughout his zone. This means he has fewer whiffs on essentially all regions of the zone, and in particular in elevated pitches on the edge just slightly above the zone versus Matt Mervis. Now, if you look at Matt Mervis on the edge of the top strike zone, he did whiff at the big league level at almost a 55 to 70% rate. Now, if you look at Michael Busch in a short cup of coffee, small sample size be damned, he only whiffed at around a 15 to 25% rate. That's a significant difference. Now, if you look at what Michael Busch does well compared to what Matt Mervis does not do well, in the bulk numbers in AAA, differences also jump off right at you. For example, the biggest difference between Matt Mervis and Michael Busch is their contact. You saw it visualized at Major League Baseball, but in AAA, Michael Busch had a contact rate of 82%. Compare that to Mervis, only 70%. And in fact, when Mervis got demoted, his contact rate was below 70%. That's not good at all. We're talking about Christopher Morel having to improve his contact rate. He almost has similar contact to Matt Mervis post demotion for Mervis. Not good. Now, also with Michael Busch, he has a very extreme disciplined approach, a chase rate of 21%. That is far below the major league average of 29%. 21% is what we saw from Dexter Fowler. It's what we saw from Ben Zobrist during those years. Average exit velocity.
What years, Brendan?
2016, Corey. You setting me up. Now, if you look at the average exit velocity in AAA, 91 miles per hour, that translates to 80th percentile in the big leagues. Where you can look at some of these numbers and question whether they'll translate is just the max exit velocity for Busch, the capacity to hit the ball hard. That's about average. He's about average max exit velocity. If you watch a video of the guy, he's not overpowering in terms of his physicality. He doesn't look like a big Rizzo-esque figure, the big KB figures we saw during those 2016 type games. But he does have a unique ability to barrel the baseball frequently, not chase, and make frequent contact. Those are the three traits that I like. Those are the three traits that Matt Mervis did not show last year and has not shown even post-demotion at AAA. They're very different players, despite both them being the same age and despite both of them right now on paper being part of that first base depth chart.
Yeah, and I think it's a good comparison, because I think a lot of people might just see, like you said, similar age guys that tore up, the minors, though Busch did it more than Mervis did.
He did.
Right?
I mean, Mervis was very impressive too in 2022. He was going off
absolutely.
all levels.
Yeah. But guys that struggled in their limited time at the majors, big time ish, different, right? Busch is rated higher, but big time prospect status at times, struggled in their debuts, questions about where they fit, things like that. Will they be able to hit at the MLB level? So that's where the comparison comes in, but it, as Brendan just pointed out, isn't necessarily the best one.
And people say he might be like a third baseman. From all the scouting reports, it sounds as if he's not good defensively there, and it sounds as if he's going to be part of that first base depth chart, which is what Sahad hinted at in his Athletic article, or just be a DH. So third base, in my mind, is not a possibility right now.
Yeah. So, we'll see. Like I said, I'm intrigued by it, but it really depends on what it means. I think if, this is a guy that you can plug in toward the bottom of this lineup, give him an opportunity that he was not really able to get in LA, and let him try and develop at the major league level as part of a lineup that you have continued to supplement in front of him. I think that sounds great. And if you're able to unlock that potential, he's back with Dustin Kelly, someone he's, likely familiar with from both of their times with the Dodgers. Sounds great. If he's a guy that the Cubs' success in 2024 hinges on him developing and being a middle of the order hitter for them, then obviously I'm not thrilled about that, because as we've discussed this entire offseason, that's not what the Chicago Cubs should be doing and relying on. So we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting. It wasn't necessarily something that I was anticipating when I got up today. Always dangerous to trade with the Dodgers. I think they're very good at kind of scouting and things like that. But one of the things that, even one of my initial reactions, without even looking too much at Busch or anything like that, like they drafted Jackson Ferris. They were the ones that went out and did that. They set up the draft with Horton to have the ability to take Ferris in that second round, and they drafted him, they developed them. If they're comfortable moving him for something like this, you don't always have to appeal to authority, of course, because the authority in these situations get things wrong all the time. But because these guys are in control of the organization we root for, and they're going to be in control for some number of time, there's certain moments where you kind of just have to trust them. And if it doesn't work out, then you hold them accountable for it. But they're the ones that drafted Jackson Ferris. They know the potential he has. They've been working with him. They've added some stuff to his repertoire, etc. If they're comfortable moving him, not in a big trade for Shane Bieber or, some massive thing like Jose Ramirez or something crazy, if they're comfortable moving him for a 26-year-old who has 27 games at the MLB level and didn't look great in them, you got to trust him a little bit. Like he's their guy. Doesn't mean they're going to be right, but these are those situations where it's like you kind of have to put your faith in Jed, and if it doesn't work out, hold him accountable. But he has put a lot into the basket that, kind of Michael Busch needs to work out. They need to be able to unlock that bat at the MLB level. But I want to transition and ask you about Yency Almonte. I know, maybe not a overly exciting relief addition, but I think I saw, again, to bring up Brian Smith, I think I saw him mention him as the kind of Tommy Hotovy project for the bullpen for 2024 that we've seen a lot of really good successes in. So anything you see from Almonte, any kind of with your understanding of Tommy Hotovy, any kind of guesses as to what they try to do with him? Where does he fit into this bullpen? Is he a 6th inning guy, an 8th inning guy? What are we looking at here?
Jed likes to be part of trades where the second offering is a high ceiling reliever.
Yeah. Has that ever worked for him?
It has worked before. There was this guy named Pedro Strop. I don't know if you remember him.
Who also, let me say something before we go any further. I know that there's probably a bunch of logic that goes into this and stuff that you have to consider. And I love the Cubs social team and marketing team, but they released like a sort of like, those like Lollapalooza style artist lists where the big headliners on the top, and it gets progressively smaller and harder to read. Pedro Strop is on the last line, almost not visible to the naked eye.
I know.
A criminal.
It really is.
And I know he's not on the current roster. He's not a legend in terms of the older guys. He's not old.
Legend. He's a legend.
No. I'm saying I can sort of see what they were doing, and they were doing some of the older guys first, things like Billy Williams, etc. Right? But the last line,
I know. We were
One of the most
talking about
consistent relievers in Cubs history.
We
I
were
mean, I
talking-
was like,
yeah.
guys, a little respect on Pedro Strop's name. Like,
we were talking
please.
about putting his number up on the foul pole like 5 years ago.
Come on now.
I know.
The last line, have you seen, and again, no disrespect to anybody as human beings, but have you seen some of the people that they invite to CubsCon? The last line,
You're going to get
Pedro
yourself
Strop?
in trouble. Yeah,
Come on
I'm
now.
with you. I'm with you.
Come on.
But if you look at Almonte now, okay, again, he's the secondary piece for the ceiling guy in terms of bulk value.
Yeah.
Now, Almonte has interesting stuff. If we look at what he profiles as and why Brian described him as a Tommy Hotovy project, the principal reason is because of his slider. His slider, if you're looking at this graph on the YouTube channel, on the far right, you're going to see a population of pitches, which are his sliders, that is on the very far right of this x-axis, or the ability for this pitch to move horizontally at an extreme rate. It has about 10 inches or so of horizontal break. The average slider has about 6 inches of horizontal break. What you'll also notice here is that the slider, the sweeping slider, it doesn't really drop that much. So it really does sweep without that depth, that dropping action to it. Now, why I think this could be a Hotovy type project is not because to maximize that slider, although I think they may attempt to do that, but is to actually add maybe a cutter. So if you look on the far left of this graph now, you're going to see a sinker and you're going to see a four seam. You see a four seam that is below league average in its ability to have carry on it. This is why he was getting lit up against left-handed batters with the Dodgers. The splits are off the charts. Against righties, his weighted on base average is 280. Against lefties, it was 370. Those are massive splits. That means Counsell is more likely from day one to use Almonte only against right-handed pitchers. Now, if you think about this, and I'll remove this graph here, we've talked about Wisniewski for 2 years now. We've talked about Wisniewski needing to add a harder, straighter pitch to offset his problems against left-handed batters. Now, with Almonte, where he's different than Wisniewski is that Wisniewski doesn't have a breaking pitch that is a little bit more vertical in terms of its ability to not drop. So Wisniewski has a cutter, but it drops a lot. And that's one reason why he lacked confidence throwing that to left-handed batters, opposite-handedness. For Almonte, he already has a breaking pitch that doesn't drop that much. For opposite-handedness, you want something a little bit straighter as your dominant hard pitch to almost simulate more of like a dominant four-seam fastball. So I think where there's an area for improvement, it's ambitious, but it's adding that cutter because his breaking pitch already doesn't drop that much. And that may offset some of the platoon splits he sees. And even if it doesn't, even if he can't add that pitch, if you use him, which we know Counsell has the ability to use his bullpen very well, if you use him against exclusively right-handed portions of the lineup, you're likely to get good results. If everything stays the same, if the slider stays the same, even with a sinker and forcing a fastball not playing up, that's 40 to 50 innings of average or so relief appearances. And that is valuable. That is what hurt the Cubs towards the back end of the last season, not having just an average reliever that they could use in the fifth and sixth inning. If that's your floor for Almonte, that's pretty damn good.
I just had a moment live on the air here where if you're watching on YouTube, I feel like you could probably see it on my face. When you said, and we know with Craig Counsell, it re-dawned on me that
he's our manager.
He's the one that gets to deal with this and not David Ross. And no disrespect to David Ross, but like I could feel, I was like, oh, wait, that's way better. Like I trust him so much more with guys like this and knowing specifically, and of course, we'll see how Almonte changes things and what he looks like, but just generally with like relievers, you're not necessarily sure about. They're not like locked down for sure back end relievers. Like you just trust Craig Counsell so much more with that to understand, hey, here's what this guy does well. Here are good situations for him. And here's where we don't want to kind of like press our luck and ask for too much. You just trust that so much with Craig Counsell. And it was like, I don't know that I forget that he's the manager, but when you said that, I was like, oh yeah,
it should
right.
Help. Yeah. But I think that's where the value of the trade that may get overlooked. by fans, including myself, when I start thinking about Busch and the limitations is, oh yeah, we have a reliever that is projected for 40, 50 innings next year. That's pretty valuable.
We needed it. Yeah.
We really needed that. So they were able to plug not just a potential hitting hole, but also a pretty big hole in their bullpen. So,
Yeah. And I think, again, it kind of pairs with both of them. Like, I would still hope that they go out and continue to add to this bullpen. I hope they continue to go out and add significantly to this offense, whether it's Cody Bellinger plus someone else, just Cody Bellinger. I don't know. We'll see what that looks like. But it does give the Cubs the ability to continue to address those things. But now you've added some options and some depth to both of those areas that you're not spending a lot of money on. So if you want to continue adding to the rotation or the bullpen or your offense after the moves that we've discussed and they've made already, you can do so, but you can do so with the vast majority of your money. So even if it's one more guy on offense, Cody Bellinger, one guy to the bullpen, I don't like him. And I've already talked to my mom about how much we don't like him, but Josh Hader, and you go and get somebody else in the rotation. I know they've been connected to Jordan Montgomery, but all of that sounds like a lot. But either way, okay, you don't make a ton of moves, but you supplement that depth in a low cost way. And then you are very intentional with those dollars and say, all right, we're going to spend it on higher end talent because we've tried to add to that pool without doing so in a super costly manner. So we'll see if that's ultimately what they do. But what they did do is they get a top hitting prospect, a top 50 prospect in baseball right now. Maybe Jackson Ferris, maybe Hope at some point down the road, especially in that Dodgers system. It seems very likely and plausible. They're in those rankings. They're in the top 50 on MLB Pipeline, but that won't be for a little while. And we need the Cubs to be getting better right now. We've already been doing the whole, hey, let's wait till this 19-year-old Owen Casey starts climbing up. Like, we've been doing it. At some point, they need to be getting better at the major league level and pushing that timeline more for that rather than constantly pushing it backwards. The Dodgers have that luxury because they just spent $1 billion on their MLB roster. So they can say, you know what, we need less of these 25, 26-year-old, maybe they're going to break out kind of guys. We need some 18-year-olds for when Freddie Freeman is gone and when Mookie Betts is gone. So I think maybe it works out for everybody. Maybe it's a rare trade that works out from everybody, but we'll see. I'm fine with it. What I want to do is hit our second ad break here. And then when we come back, if you want to envision it, I don't think he'll do it literally, but Brendan will put on his lab coat, his goggles, so that he keeps his eye safety is very important in the laboratory. I've heard.
It is.
And we will get the pitch doctor breakdown of your new starting pitcher, Shota Imanaga.
All right, Corey. So break here from our friends at Midtown Athletic Club. Midtown Athletic Club has 4 Chicagoland locations: Palatine, Bannockburg, Willowbrook, Midtown Athletic Club and Hotel in the middle of Bucktown and Lincoln Park. Right now, Midtown Palatine has launched a multi-million-dollar transformation of their club. It will be complete early in 2024, and Midtown is offering no initiation fees this January at their Bannockburn, Palatine, and Willowbrook locations. There's something to do for everyone at these clubs, for single people, families with kids, people looking to make lifestyle changes for their New Year's resolutions, or for into holistic wellness. Midtown Athletic Club has something for you. Also, beautiful looking clubs. I've seen pictures, I've seen videos from our friends at CHGO, from Carm and Braggs. I keep saying this, I want to go out there. I want to experience it myself. They have these very super luxe locker rooms with wet and dry saunas and premium amenities. They have amazing outdoor and indoor pools and hot tubs. They have yoga, boxing, ride and spin cycling classes, cross-training, group exercises. They have it all. They also have the best tennis courts and programming in the sport. Midtown has indoor, outdoor tennis, pickleball, and paddle tennis, USTA professional quality all the way. So head over to midtown.com/CHGO to find out more and to tour the Midtown Athletic Club nearest you. And if you need new floors to start off your new year, well, I got something for you at Empire Today. With Empire Today, you get to shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs with quick and professional installation and a low price guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats, but Empire can't be beaten on quality, service, speed. So these competitors advertise low quality products that Empire simply will not carry. Empire will never promise the lowest prices, but they only do that because putting flooring in your home is what they prioritize. They would never put flooring that they don't like in their homes in yours. They keep shopping for floors simple with a curated product selection. They have a philosophy that is to help you find what you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What they leave out of their selection is as important as what they put in. They have a very cool virtual floor designer. It's a great way to see how new floors will look in your space. And they pride themselves on their convenient shop at home service. They can help customers shop for floors where they use their floors so they can see exactly what their new floors will look like. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions do apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we can just take a brief second, let's give it up for Dr. Brendan Miller. He said Palatine correctly.
Screw you. Screw you. Screw you. Screw you. You know, I made my font bigger on my computer screen. You know, my screen is bright. These computer screens are bright, man. I need to get those UV protection goggles, you know, or those blue light goggles. I can't see. My eyes are strained whenever I do these podcasts. I'm sacrificing my vision for the betterment of everyone.
Okay. Anyway, so let's talk Shota Imanaga, Brendan.
Okay.
We talked about that, kind of going through who was available, at least, you know, guys that were actually hearing as being available, whether they're free agents or via trade, for the Cubs starting rotation. And we got one. And it was one that I think you and I were both the most interested in the Cubs getting. And of course, on Thursday night, we also hear that one of those other options, Marcus Stroman, is off the market and going to the Yankees. So I was very pleased that the Cubs were able to get this done. I think, as we've talked about, Imanaga is a really intriguing option for this rotation, and was able to do some really great stuff over in Japan. And of course, you have the usual questions of how things translate and things like that. But I'm very glad that the Cubs have added to the rotation, and, you know, hopefully at the very least, Imanaga can replace Stroman's production. And I think he has the potential to go even beyond that with some of the stuff that he has. So I'm very pleased with the deal. The one thing I say before I turn it over to you, because I'm going to let you go as long as you want. You said, what did you say?
Okay.
You have 6 graphs. So
for him, yeah, I have 3 graphs here.
Like, go on, go ahead, do your thing, and give
you.
people the full picture of what they're getting here. But for me, I'm looking too, like, just at the cost, man. Like, this is just a deal where, like, there is like almost no risk in this.
Know.
If he's not good, you know, like, yeah, that'll be bad, but that's true of any player. But it has the potential to be a short deal with the way that they've structured this contract and some of the option abilities, their ability to turn it into a longer deal if they like on the Cubs end. And, you know, for what is it, 15 mil a year? The
13.
average?
13.
Like,
it's crazy.
I mean, whatever. If he's the 5th best pitcher the Cubs have, if he just like, whatever. And with the ceiling that he has, especially if you get him over and play around with things to make his repertoire maybe fit facing major league specific hitters better, the potential is really there. So this just seems like a slam dunk or a no-brainer, at least, to try out, and has the potential to just be a really exceptional deal for this team. So it's not always the case that you want them to only be hunting deals, and we've talked about that. But if they're able to get some of them, you do want that, because it keeps the flexibility, and just, obviously you don't want them tied down with too many bad things. So I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited to see what he can bring. And I'm assuming that by the end of your time talking, I'm going to end up being even more excited.
It's stacking good decisions upon good decisions. That's always the key
Where did
phrase
you
from
learn
Correct
that
Counsel.
from?
I heard it from our new manager, Correct Counsel.
Oh,
I know, our manager, Correct Counsel, Corey. This is one of those decisions that we're going to look back on, I think, and be like, wow, that was almost a steal. Now, there is risk, and the risk for Imanaga is he may need some adjustment. Number one. Number two, his velocity is not the highest. Number three, he is older. He's going to be entering his 30s. And number four, the days in between starts differ as a Japanese pitcher versus a major league pitcher.
Yeah.
So those are all uncertainties. To your point, for $13 million, that is a risk I'm willing to accept. $13 million translates, if you do $1 per WAR estimate, of like 1.5 wins per season. That is a steal. If you assume that Imanaga can pitch 130 innings at league average production, that's already well above what you're paying him. So that's where I fall back on and think, wow, this is such a low risk deal, even though there still is embedded risk within this contract. But I like it. I think the ceiling is very high. Now, what does he do well? Those are all the limitations. What does he do well? The main reason that I like Imanaga is the four-seam fastball. Yeah, it doesn't get thrown 95 plus miles per hour, but there's ways to get beyond velocity if it has naturally good-looking shape to it. Imanaga has some of the best looking shape to his four-seam fastball among any major leaguer. I was talking to a few pitching coaches about this. They're excited principally because of his ability to have vertical break on this pitch. If you look at his pitch, his four-seam fastball, you compare it to other lefty pitchers who throw four-seam fastballs, you already see drastic differences. The drastic difference, if you look at this animated graph here, is that one is thrown from an extremely low release point. It's thrown from about 5.5 feet off the ground. Now, the average four-seam fastball is thrown about 5.9 feet off the ground. In addition, the average four-seam fastball has about 15 to 16 inches of induced vertical break, whereas Imanaga, again, is 20 inches. So if you compare where he throws pitches, it has among the lowest release points in Major League Baseball, and it has the best carry in Major League Baseball. Think about this. You have a low release point with some of the most carry on that pitch. Exactly right. Yeah. How did that do in the NPB? It did pretty well, but what we've seen from different folks on social media is that the location of those four-seam fastballs weren't optimal. He actually used a four-seam fastball low in the zone. Now, if you look at his pitches up in the zone with the four-seam fastball, he got a lot of whiffs with that pitch. And his average whiff rate with the four-seam was better than league average in Japan and comparable to what you would see from an average four-seam in Major League Baseball. And Japan is more of a contact-oriented type league. If you imagine he throws that pitch more up in the zone, then you can kind of calculate you would expect more whiffs as a result. That's the main reason.
Now, Brendan, unfortunately, the Cubs don't have a pitching coach that likes attacking the top of the zone, so that's a bummer. Wait a minute, he loves doing that. Sorry, I get that.
Tommy out of it. Yeah. And they have a history with turning these unique looking fastballs into some of the best pitchers in the league. Justin Steele's not overpowering, man. He has the craziest looking four-seam fastball in the league, one of the best fastballs by a run value estimate. And it doesn't get thrown 97, 98 miles per hour, but look what it does. It has a funky cut rising looking shape to it. It's unique. Similarly, you have a unique lefty fastball with a low release point and a lot of carry. Now, the secondary stuff, I don't care what the secondary stuff is, I'll be honest with you, because he has so many different types of secondary pitches. He has, for example, he has a cutter, a slider, a curveball, and a splitter that he used pretty frequently across Japan. So two of those pitches are destined to, I think, work out with some type of improvement. Because you have the base of the four seam, you know that you have a staple of foundation to work off your secondary pitches. And even with the secondary pitches he does have, they already look pretty good. For example, his slider already has more horizontal than your league average slider. If you look at the pitching coach U, he has some good data where they show that it had 12 inches of horizontal break. Again, the average in Major League Baseball is 6 inches. This is Japanese data, different baseball, so different movement profiles, but nevertheless points to the fact that he can throw sliders with a lot of break to it. They can mess with it, but again, four-seam fastball, very good, very appealing, unique. It should translate well The data looks similar to what we saw in the World Baseball Classic with American technology. So we know it is a true 20-ish inch vertical break. I'm excited, man. I think the ceiling is very high for him. I would be a little surprised if they don't end up picking that second year option up, where the total contract goes from 13 million per year to upwards to 80 million in total sum. I'd be very surprised, given that he has the strong foundation of that four-seam fastball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact timing, but the contract was a little complicated. As you might imagine, I think when a lot of this was coming through, I was still recovering from the festivities on Monday night. And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I can't right now. My brain is not in the headspace to figure out what is going on in this contract. I was like, okay, another day when I'm a little more with it than that.
Yeah,
so
a little bit more hydrated.
Yeah. So, yeah, very interesting. If you looked at the Cubs rotation right now, depending on how they want to handle the back end portion of it, obviously Justin Steele up top. We'll see what they are able to do with Jameson Taillon, though, and of course, you and I ended up, I think, tracking along with our good friend over at CubsInsider.com, Evan Altman, maybe more than anything in my life, like Jason Hayward's work in Mesa over the winter in December and January, and
hitting
his
cage
swing
videos.
changes. Yeah, I mean, when I remember the three of us would be like, he's lowered his hands, like Anyway, so not to belabor that exercise, but Taillon has been in Mesa. He's been sharing a lot of videos, and I think when you look at his track record and that they have the information on what they need to fix, I don't know to the exact level I expect him to be better, but I do genuinely expect him to be better.
You would bet money on it for sure.
I would be stunned if he has the same problems, because him and everybody around him, they know what they are. And it was just too difficult to fix in the middle of a season, but they're putting in the work. So I expect better there. And then, of course, you have Kyle Hendricks coming back, now Shota Imanaga. So again, how you order those, let's say the three guys, Justin Steele is your number one, at least going into this season. And, then you have that depth, Jordan Wicks, Javier Assad, Hayden Wisniewski, maybe guys like Ben Brown, Cade Horton come up eventually. That's a pretty solid mix. That's a very solid group. You don't necessarily have, Justin Steele was, of course, competing for a Cy Young up until about, his last like 3 starts basically last year. But you don't have those, you don't have the Garrett Cole in that rotation as an example. But you do have a really solid group of more than 5 guys, which, as we all know, you really need to get through these seasons. So I still hope they continue to add to the rotation. I hope they continue to add to the ceiling of this rotation, because the group that we just laid out certainly has a fair number of questions, really, with every single guy in that rotation. But if they keep adding, like if you have a solid, like 8 to 9 guys that you might be able to turn to eat some starts, that feels pretty solid, because we have seen in certain years how bad it can get when you do not have that depth after the number 4 starter or the number 5 starter. Things get really weird at certain points. So it feels like they have a nice sort of foundation here. Again, I would like to see continued addition, but I'm very excited about the Imanaga addition and what he can do. And I think the Cubs rotation is in a pretty solid place. Maybe not great, maybe not, that upper tiered ceiling for some rotations, but I think especially in this division, I think we can work with what we have now, and I hope they keep adding.
They got to keep adding. That's the thing. This is a good base. They have good depth. They have good AAA guys coming up. They still, in my mind, need to keep adding just to improve that foundation. It does make me think, when we're talking about this and the price and the amount of payroll room they have right now, they're at about $200 million, about $37 million below the first tier of the tax. They're about 75 to 80 million below the second or the third tier of the tax. You start thinking, okay, well, we talked about offsetting risk. Now, you posed a question last week. How interested are you in Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell? This is one of those deals where if you start looking at the context of the Cubs, accepting some risk in a short-term contract with Blake Snell actually now might make more sense For example, let's say you have a super.
Is he interested in signing a Cubs
That's-
Marcus Stroman deal, perhaps?
Yeah, but like a short-term deal, 28, 30 million AAV, have a Carlos Correa type-esque opt up. I don't know. Jed's very complicated with these, but you see what I'm trying to say. You have now 13 million soaked up in Imanaga. That's below industry expectations. We heard maybe 100 plus million in total, 20 million AAV. That's almost like 40% what ended up happening. Now you can offset the risk in Snell because you have Imanaga at that.
Well, and that's what I was talking about. You know, when we were talking about the trade, like you've added to your team, and again, in uncertain ways, and differing from Imanaga to Busch to Almonte, very different, very uncertain to different degrees. But you've added to your team, to the depth of your team in one way or another, and you didn't spend a lot of money to do it. So you still have money left, and not, you can keep pushing this team. And as you always talk about, getting that win projection a little safer, things like that. And you didn't spend a lot of money on these 3 moves. And of course, these 3 moves didn't move them from, call it 3rd place to 2nd place or something in the division, or however you would want to look at it. They're probably not that significant, but they didn't cost you very much. So if this is just the start and you go out and say, do something like that for the rotation, bring back Cody Bellinger, maybe add Chapman or Hoskins to play one of the corners, DH, supplement Morel and Busch, who don't necessarily have a position, but you're hoping they can both hit, add some, cheaper guys maybe at the back end to that bullpen, like starts to look like a pretty solid roster. So is that what the plan is? I don't know. The report, the sense that the industry seems to have is that the Cubs are still going to spend some money. I know there was a lot of talk about their real interest, and perhaps even, according to some, having offers out to guys like Hoskins, Chapman.
That's what Jim Bowden said.
That's what he said.
Significant offers.
So, now you're at the point where, as you point out, and I think, years ago, this wouldn't really be how you would kind of look at things, but especially with how the MLB offseason keeps taking longer, and you do have guys kind of not finding the market that they had hoped for, does it open the opportunity for the Cubs to entice some of these guys to come here exactly on the terms that Jed wants? Short term, maybe bigger money for those 2 or 3 years, but hey, like, you don't have an 8 or 9 year deal out there. You could come to play at Wrigley Field for 2 years and then go try to get another contract. Does that interest you? So maybe what I'm saying is that the game and the market and how this all works has changed. We've seen it, like with the Correa thing with Stroman and the Cubs a few years ago. Like, you do see this stuff a little more often than you certainly used to. And maybe the rest of this offseason falls into Jed's lap.
It's always been a possibility. It's always been very unsettling. I will say, we've talked about this.
Of course it is. It's very risky. Of course.
Yeah, there's risk involved when you shorten up your time window, for sure. If you were to go into the last, I don't know, what is this now, 6 weeks before spring training starts, do you think in the next 6 weeks that these signings change and trades change the Cubs' pursuit of Bellinger or Hoskins or Chapman? And just to give my brief opinion before I throw it back to you, on the surface, because you have more first base options, looking at newly acquired Michael Busch, Morel is even taking reps at first base, you can imagine that first base might be more redundant if you sign Rhys Hoskins, for example. It actually might be more redundant if you sign Cody Bellinger, assuming PCA becomes your everyday center fielder. For me, I can see on paper Matt Chapman being more likely to sign now than he would 2 weeks ago with this new roster addition. Do you think this affects any of the pursuit?
Well, and so in that scenario, you're doing Bellinger? What? Matt Chapman at third, you're doing Morel at DH, Busch at first, PCA in center.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, look, it's always possible that their thought is, like we're waiting for, as we kind of heard, and Jared Banner, some of his comments sort of alluded at that. And especially when they hadn't made a major league transaction, there was a thought of like, yeah, do they say, hey, we don't have all of the young kind of prospect pre-arb guys settled in their positions, and we're going to wait until we have more of that before we like truly push in and go crazy on some of these things because we didn't get Shohei Ohtani and stuff like that. All I can say is I hope not.
Do you think it affects Bellinger?
No. My gut feeling, no. I don't think so. I believe that what I would think is that they see the bat in Matt Busch. They see a guy that doesn't really have a clear position, and they have a few open positions. They currently right now do not have somebody that is truly their third baseman, truly their first baseman, and I would argue truly their center fielder. It's PCA's job to earn, but I don't necessarily know that he is breaking camp being given, hey, trot out there for 162 games like Dexter Fowler, did, kid, right? So I don't think we're at that point yet, even if that is the plan at some point in the hopefully very near future. So I think you identify what you believe is a major league ready bat, and you use a young pitcher out of a system now that has more talent in terms of their pitchers. And you kind of worry about where he's getting those at bats later. And you see how some of these deals play out. And I think it's a good sort of insurance because you are dealing with a lot of Boris clients. You're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. You don't know. Maybe somebody does panic and come over the top for Cody Bellinger, and you can't really control that. So I don't think so. I don't think that they are acquiring.
I think it naturally does.
I know that because you and I spoke earlier this afternoon, but feel free to articulate why.
He's part of the equation. Busch is part of the equation. When you start projecting 2024, and more importantly for this front office, 2025 and above, Busch is now part of those projections. Now you start calculating risk, reward, and you look at Bellinger's profile, PCA's profile,
sure,
you have to now include in the Bellinger risk, what is the likelihood that Busch provides value? Then you start looking at 2024. What is the likelihood this team wins the World Series? Slim right now, given they're not a 95 plus win team. So you look at Jed's, spreadsheets, if you will, and you start asking the question, does it make sense to give Bellinger a 5, 6, 7-year deal right now when post 2024, you could have a Michael Busch who's providing value and a plethora of new free agents, including even Rhys Hoskins. And ultimately, if you sign Rhys Hoskins compared to Cody Bellinger, you can still have 2025 for Rhys Hoskins on a new contract or just picking up an option. So I do think it leaves Cody Bellinger's discussion with more variables. I'm not saying personally that I would. I'm not saying personally I would not want Cody Bellinger. Well, he's part now of the risk.
Yeah. Well, and look, I mean, to your point, because I think if people aren't fully hearing you and understanding you, they're going to think like, that of course they should still get Cody Bellinger. But I think you bring that up because they made this trade. They're the ones that traded one of their better pitching prospects and a young guy that they've been developing for this guy. So they're not doing that to just have him sit in AAA and like rot away. They believe in it. They've paid a price to get this guy. So they do have him in some version of their plans. I don't know, I guess is my answer. I think here's how I would better phrase this. I don't think it affects their plan to improve their need and hopeful attention to improving the offense. Does it have to be through certain players? I don't think so. But I think this is, to me, what my hope is, again, better depth for your offense and for your roster rather than trying to fill out those pieces with old washed up talent that does end up costing you money. Take the flyer that you can unlock a guy that has been blocked in a system and on a team that just has too much talent at their major league level. You take it, and hopefully he is a nice addition to whatever else you do in this offseason. I would be very disappointed if the scenario you're laying out is what it is. But again, that would be another point, and it's the same thing as the trade. Like they better be right then. Like they made this move, they're gambling the future of those two prospects on the future of Michael Busch. And if they were going to be really thinking that way, like then they had better be right. That's all I can really say.
I think a better way of phrasing this is I think it changes the point at which they meet Boris. I think without Busch, they would have gone a little bit higher. For sake of an example, 180 million. Now with Busch, I could see them only meeting them at 140, 150, which is extreme because it's not when teams, I imagine when teams are projecting value at a position, it's not by a player by player basis, it's by a position sum basis. So Bellinger plus Busch. Then you start calculating the projection probabilities. Busch moves that forward. It does. So then you start thinking, should I put my resources at that position, given that now I push that projection a little bit further? That's all I'm saying.
Again, we don't know how they're operating. Like that's the key here. So we'll see. I hear what you're saying, though. Yes, I do hear what you're saying. We'll see. I mean, look, as long as this offense continues to get better, they can do whatever they want. But there's certain paths to do that, and I think Cody Bellinger is one of the easiest ones. And then look, hopefully PCA takes that job. Hopefully Busch is someone who has forced his way in the lineup. And then you're answering this question. So and that's up to Craig Counsell, who's an excellent person to have to deal with.
Our manager, Craig Counsell.
Yeah. Where do you pencil these guys in? Who's playing center? Who's playing first? Who's DHing? Who's playing third? You know, he's a great person to have to handle that. And that sounds like a great problem to have. So I hope that that's where we end up. But yeah, look, like I said, they made the move. They acquired this guy. This is not some random person. This is a guy they paid a pretty steep price, especially depending on who you ask, to get. He is in their plans. And whether that is something that makes sense to all of us or some of us or none of us, like that's how you have to think of things. Like they went out and traded this guy and they paid a price to do it. So they're not doing that to throw him in AAA and like see what happens a few years from now. Like clearly they believe in him. They're going to do something with him.
And we will judge what the cost is. If it works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we will judge the cost of what could have been. And part of the what could have been may end up being Cody Bellinger being extended. It may end up being getting Rhys Hoskins on a 1-2 year pillow type contract. We'll see. There's a lot of moves to be made.
Cost for all of this, you know. So like, let's say they still do go get Bellinger, and maybe that's the group for the offense. Morel's your everyday third baseman, and there's an opportunity cost there. We're going to evaluate at some point, would it have been a better decision to sign Rhys Hoskins for 1 year to play first base rather than making this trade for Busch? There's opportunity costs everywhere. So yeah, it's one of those things we're going to have to see where the rest of this offseason goes. And then, of course, they made the move. They're going to have to show their strength in developing Busch and giving him this opportunity. So it's interesting. Been an interesting week.
It's an interesting week. It's exciting. I think it does change even the potential role for Morel. You can imagine redundancy in your best case scenario. PCA takes the position of center field by the summer, and then let's say you do sign Bellinger goes to first base. Well, now you have a DH spot that is probably filled by hopefully a successful Busch. Where does Morel play?
And look, like that's good.
That is good.
Competition breeds good things in these scenarios. And I think, this is true of Morel. This is true of Busch. Like that's the work they have to put in. Like you like for Christopher Morel, he can be a DH, and we'll see, but he would need to hit more to be a truly valuable DH and hit more consistently to be a truly valuable DH in this league. What was I think he had an 820 OPS last year. Like you can do better than that. If you're going to put someone only at DH, you can get more value out of that position. So it's on him to put in the work and find a way to get on the field. It's the same as Busch. If people don't believe he can be a third baseman, I don't even know if he is good at first base. Like that's on these guys. And that's what that competition will
say
breed.
That he's a decent first baseman. I don't know if that's true, but that was one report.
And it just, we saw this last year with someone in Madrigal who, you and I both have expressed our opinions on. But what I'm saying is it was put upon him like, you're not going to play if you can't play third base. That's it. And he went out and did it. And that's the situation you have with some of these guys. Like, these positions are taken, man. And maybe the Cubs are going to sign some guys that are going to take some more positions. Like, you have got to find a way to make it so that Craig Counsell cannot keep you out of the lineup. And that's what's going to be incumbent upon the Cubs organization, their development team, and these players to put in the work and figure those things out. So it's going to be very interesting. And, with CubsCon coming up, hopefully, maybe there's a little more action. Maybe they have some surprises in store for us, or we wait until that dust settles and we come back next week and see what Jed is doing in the meantime.
I mean, at this rate, we're going to have significantly more trades and signings to talk about by next week. Hopefully.
Yeah. And, look, it's something that I kind of forget, but it does. I feel like I get my memory jogged when it is CubsCon, because that sort of feels like, at least in our calendar, it feels like sort of the first thing that happens every new year. The dates change, but from that period of like New Year's and the holidays to early January, it all feels like New Year's to me, like the holidays and all that stuff. CubsCon is usually that centering of like, okay, we're in a new year. We are going forward. It is not the holidays anymore. And it's a reminder, like, pitchers and catchers is not that far away. So,
dude, we're like a month away.
Whatever Jed is planning to do, or however they want this team to look in their kind of ideal world at this point, you got to get to it. You kind of got to get cooking on that. So we'll see.
I know. I've been talking myself into Blake Snell. Like, I could see
on
it.
This episode, or
I was thinking about it. I've been thinking about it. Like a 2-year contract. Hell, man, give him like $35 million a year. I don't care. Give him 2 years, $70 million contract.
Fine.
Right? That would be sick.
Yeah. Hey, like, look,
that's
like
what I'm talking about.
It's a dangerous. A lot of this is a dangerous way of going about things, and it will, if it's always your philosophy, hoping for these creative sort of fall in your lap kind of things, it will keep you out of certain players. The Otanis, the Bryce Harpers, things like that. But listen, if that's what Jed is going to do, I hope it works. Of course I do, because he's running our team. So
holy smokes, man! On that deal, that would be insane. That would be insane.
Okay, well, I hope you're not let down by
2 years, $35 million per year, 30-year option of $15 million.
So. We'll end with this. We're nearing the 80-minute point, but I guess we'll just finish. We've ebbed and flowed a lot as this offseason has gone on in our hope, our optimism, our absolute just pessimism and anger, and et cetera, et cetera. After this week of moves, you're still reading some of these rumors. You're kind of seeing where things are. How do you feel now about the Cubs offseason? You don't have to give it a final grade, but I feel like the audience has been along with us in terms of being, are we going to get Juan Soto? Are we going to get Ohtani? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? To the, what is Jed doing? Is he even awake? Is he alive? Are the Cubs going to spend a single dollar? I hate this. I hate every. Where are you now? Where do you find yourself now?
I mean, of course I feel better. We have a major league signing for the starting pitching staff at a lower than expected rate. I feel better. My expectations are stupid high, though. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, I'm excited about Busch. I'm not going to say that. I need to have a clear-cut middle of the order bat. And if we go into the season without that, then I probably will be disappointed. Yeah. I will. I always wanted this team to go into 2024 as a 92 to 94 win squad. I don't think that's likely. I always thought it was ambitious. I thought maybe Jed would do it, but I've changed now my expectations to maybe a soft push to 90 or so, and then reevaluate after 2024. I think that's the most likely outcome. I would not prefer that, but we could be talking a year from now and the team's in a very different spot, a healthier spot than the plan I would have hoped they would take.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm right there with you. I've always kind of centered it as they need to be the best team in this division, and there can't be a question about that. I don't think we're there yet.
No, not even
Yeah, we're
close.
not.
We're not close.
So until they, and I don't know if that's going to be like one player, and I'm like, yeah, okay, now they're at that point. I don't know when that point will come, but they're not there now.
I mean, I know when it will come when I start adding up all of this wins and they become a top, 8 team. Then it will hit me.
Yeah.
And they're not there yet. Right now, they're still middling.
Until they get to the point that's always been my standard for this offseason was you need this division is weak. You have a couple of these teams, really not putting in the effort that they have been in the last few years, or just not in the position that they've been in the last few years. It's yours for the taking. Go and take it. And I don't think they've done that yet. So I obviously feel better because they have spent money on things that are not backup catchers. So that is a good place to start.
But we do have the best backup catcher depth in baseball. It's a fact.
And is that the saying?
What?
Backup catchers win championships?
That's
it's defense or starting pitching that wins.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I must have heard that somewhere.
It's easy to confuse. I get it.
I must have heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
I feel better, but as you and I kind of laid out, this has to just be the beginning of their offseason, not the bulk of it or the highest points or anything like that. This has to just be the beginning, and hopefully whatever Jed is planning is able to come to fruition, and Blake Snell or whoever falls directly into his lap for no money and no years. Do you think anybody wants to play for the Cubs for free? Have they explored that before?
They never asked me. I put out my own videos on social of me throwing and hitting.
Interesting.
Got no response. I have 23 inches of induced vertical break. I have better vertical break than Imanaga. I got no response. None. I tried.
Yeah. Hey.
I'd pay money to play. I'd give Tommy my money.
Yeah. Right. That's the new market inefficiency. Getting paid to, Not only are we not spending money against the luxury tax, we're gaining paying me money.
Yeah. That should be something they should do.
All right. Well, I think that's what we have. I think the trade is an interesting one, because we can look at these guys, but of course it all depends on how they continue to develop and how they play at the major league level. I would, as we have, encourage you, we have some really great friends of the podcast, guys like Greg Huss over at Northside Bound, Greg Zumack, Brian Smith, that whole team over there does great work. So if you want to continue learning about the guys that the Cubs just acquired, or, even to learn more about guys like Jackson Ferris, who they gave up, and really just understanding the deal, those guys can really take care of you there. And of course, Greg was on with Cody, Luke, and Ryan on Thursday afternoon as part of their bigger conversation. So, kind of a wait and see thing. But as far as Imanaga goes, very excited. I think it's a great deal and one that has pretty low risk and high reward for the Chicago Cubs. So good start for Jed Hoyer and his team, hopefully with more to follow. As I said, keep it tuned to the CHGO Cubs social channels and the CHGO Sports YouTube page. We will have boots on the ground at CubsCon at the hotel, talking to players, talking to fans, producing all sorts of content. So please be sure to follow along with the CHGO Cubs team for all of that. Brendan and I will be back with you next Friday, hopefully with more to break down. Maybe do we have to keep threatening Jed with that?
Listen, man, Augie Ojeda special coming up.
Oh,
look out. Can do 45 minutes in Augie Ojeda.
Oh, man. Okay.
Here we go.
And listen, we're talking about random names, but don't if Brendan and I will talk for 4 hours about what Derek Lee and Aramis Ramirez mean to this franchise if we have to. We're naming random names, but if you want us to get into the good stuff, break out the top shelf, bottles, we can do that too.
I would love to talk about LaTroy Hawkins.
I don't. Why would you even say that? Unless we're talking about the homer he gave up to Dexter Fowler at the early portion of the 2015 season. I don't want to talk.
Can I tell a quick story here?
Yes.
It's kind of a mean story, but it's very memorable to me. I was in the bleachers when LaTroy Hawkins was playing for the Cubs, and I'm I'm not part of like the whole raucous, like talking smack to the players. This group was, and LaTroy Hawkins' like teenage son was throwing to his dad, and they're heckling his son. You throw like your dad. Your dad's a bum. Oh my gosh, look at your throwing motion, to this like 12, 13, 14-year-old kid. I felt bad for him. It was left field, by the way. You know, they have the whole left field, right field sucks thing. That day, left field kind of sucked, probably.
Yeah, well, I can see that.
Yeah.
LaTroy Hawkins is always the center of what I say is the first time, I think my mom realized I needed to take a chill pill. I don't remember who they were playing. I think it was the Phillies, but I always tell this story. They have the bases loaded, maybe one or no outs. He catches the liner on the mound and he throws it over to first, and it hits the guy in the helmet and goes into the stands, and they score 2 runs on that. And we had like a gate to keep one of the dogs off the carpet. And I think I picked it up and like threw it across the room. And so this is probably 2004, 2005. So I'm like 13 or 14. And I do kind of vividly remember my mom being like, you need to like calm down. That was not at all like an appropriate reaction to that. You can be angry, you can yell even, but like, dude, down a notch.
That was appropriate. I would have done the same thing.
And I said, Mom, he didn't need to throw the ball. He was never going to get that out at first base. Why would he throw that ball?
I can totally see teenage Corey doing exactly that with her mannerisms and everything. I can for sure see it.
And, my mom was probably like, that's a great argument, honey. Very baseball conscious, but please don't throw stuff in the house.
My similar story was when Antonio Alfonseca gave up a walk-off home run against St. Louis. I think it was Sunday Night Baseball. Took a pillow, chucked it at my blinds, broke my blinds. Antonio Alfonseca got me in trouble. I was grounded. Hate that guy.
So listen, what I'm saying is we'll do it if we have to. Jed,
we will.
If you want to keep making major league moves, keep making this team better, we're here for it. And we would much prefer to talk about that. But we have other things to do if we must. So Brendan and I will be back with you next Friday. As I said, stay tuned for CubsCon coverage this weekend. If you are attending, have a good time. I hope it is whatever you want it to be. I've only been once. I'm not a big convention guy, but if you're hoping to get an autograph or a photo or meet a player or ask a question, I hope you get to do that. I hope it's a great time. I know it's always a good time connecting with the larger Cubs family. So cheers to everybody at CubsCon. Brendan and I will talk to you next Friday. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.